Our next speaker is Dr. John F. Perry. He's a graduate of Dartmouth College with a degree in sociology and received his MD from Jefferson Medical College of the Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia. He's an orthopedic surgeon in Chester County, Pennsylvania, and has a robust medical legal practice in Florida and Pennsylvania. He has campaigned for the U.S. Senate and governor in Pennsylvania, and is author of a book, The Freedom Plan, An American Answer to Healthcare Reform. Dr. Perry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, I'm Dr. John Perry, and this is the second talk I'm giving for the summit. I wanted to talk to you today about serving America, how enlightened reform can turn back the socialist juggernaut. Well, those are fighting words, socialist juggernaut. But let's talk about what I mean. How can the establishment of a direct pay medical system not only improve quality of care, but also help business expansion, promote increased wages by bringing about economic efficiency, engender a spirit of self-reliance in the American people, and help defeat a culture of dependency? Pretty tall order, huh? Well, I'm going to show you why I think this is not only possible, it's likely if we could get good healthcare reform done, and get a direct pay medical marketplace. In my first talk, I discussed with you what happened to healthcare in America briefly, kind of giving an overview of the Freedom Plan, which is a scientific approach to healthcare reform. Basically, analyze what went wrong with the system, and then take each point where we went off the rails, and put us back onto the rails. But before I begin, I think I need to probably identify with you my political background. Up until the time I was about 32 years old, I was a Democrat. Around 1980, several years later, I became a Republican. At the end of the Reagan administration, I became a Libertarian. And then when I had to run for statewide office as a Republican, I became a Republican again. Well, at this point, I am none of those things anymore. What I consider myself and what I would like for others to consider themselves is, let's not label ourselves one or the other, but let's be pragmatists. Very simply, we look at what works and what doesn't work. We look at the American healthcare system like a patient. If what we're doing is not working, we need to change the treatment. If you look at society, the same thing. We've seen riots in places like Baltimore and Ferguson, whatever. There are long-term situations in place there that have not worked and made some things worse. Let's change those. I don't see that happening. That's very distressing to me. But that's my approach to things now. Now, I'm going to tell you, I've had a tough time lately. I wonder if you have too. Times have been very trying. There's a man who was one of my heroes growing up. He won the decathlon in the Olympics. And then just recently, after all these years, he decided that he's a woman. And he wants to be called Caitlyn. That's difficult for me. I don't know if it's difficult for you or not, but it's difficult for me. I mean, he was, like I say, one of my heroes growing up. And then right on top of that, I find out that there's this blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman, very attractive woman, who decided that she was African-American. And in fact, she became the head of the NAACP. I think it was the chapter in Spokane, Washington. And she was outed by her parents. And when she was asked about it, what she said was, well, I haven't really investigated my birth certificate yet. But even before that, the Supreme Court came down with a decision. They found in the Constitution a right of the federal government to require United States citizens to purchase something. And if they didn't purchase it, they would be fined. So I went back to my Constitution and I looked to see if I could find it there. You know, I went through that whole Constitution and it doesn't say that there. I can't find that anywhere. That's very upsetting. And then they said, oh, it was a tax. Okay, it's a tax. So you go to the Affordable Care Act marketplace, and now you have a choice of like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 different plans that you can choose. One plan costs this amount, one plan costs this amount, another plan costs another amount, one has deductibles this amount, one has co-pays this amount, and so on and so forth. So your tax, as such, varies. It's not really a uniformly applied tax. It varies from person to person. It varies from whatever their particular preference is for health care. I don't see any tax in that. I think I'm concerned about that decision, as sure as most of you are. But it saved the Affordable Care Act until this year. And then I have to ask you this question. How did you feel when the court took the clear sentence structure, the clear wording of the Affordable Care Act that says that the states would be the only ones that would be allowed to subsidize health care premiums, and just disregarded it, just threw it out? They said that was not the intent. These are supposed to be the greatest legal minds in our country, and they disregard legality, what the clear meaning of words is. I don't know how you felt about that, but this is how I felt about it. I felt very discouraged. Not so much about the Affordable Care Act as I am about a Supreme Court that doesn't seem to be playing it straight. If I offend you, I'm sorry. I don't believe they're playing it straight. I think they are highly politicized, and I think they are not acting in the best legal interests of the country. So this much I can tell you. When it comes to healthcare reform or medical delivery reform, whatever you want to call it, we're not going to get any help from the Supreme Court. Well, can we get help from the legislature? I have, as you know, I've written the book that I've mentioned to you before, the Freedom Plan on American Answer to Healthcare Reform. It's a scientific book, but I tried to make it easy to read. And it analyzes things. It gives a perfectly plausible explanation as to what happened and why. And it gives a way out for all of us. And you may disagree with some of it. I haven't found anybody really who's read the book who can really disagree on any substance of it. And I've had a lot of people read this book, hundreds. But do you think legislators will respond to this? This is in the hands of multiple legislatures. It's in the hands of the head of the House Subcommittee on Health Care. He's got it. He asked for it at a meeting. It's in the hands of another congressman who's interested in entitlement reforms. It's in the hands of at least 4 of today's presidential Republican candidates. A number of state legislators as well. And here's what I find. I find an immense lack of response. So I could take that personally, but then I thought about it, and really, what do politicians respond to? Do they respond to science? Do they respond to reason necessarily? To some extent, some of them will, but en masse, will they? Actually, no, they have a constituency base. The Republicans have a constituency base, and the Democrats have a constituency base. And that's who they respond to. They respond to political pressure from their base. Okay. They're not going to respond even to the people. Just think about the passage of the Affordable Care Act. The majority of the country in every poll was against it, and it still passed. And that should tell you all you need to know about how much help you can get from legislators unless there is political pressure. Well, we've looked at some of the social aspects of things, okay? Let's look at the economic aspect of what's going on in America today. Where is America today? Well, our unemployment rate's about 5.5%, something like that, but that's deceiving. The labor participation rate, that is the amount of people that are in the labor pool who could have a job and who actually are working, is now down to 62%. And that is the lowest that it's been since 1976, despite a lot of stimulus on part of the administration. That's a problem. How about household income? Household income has gone down from $56,000 roughly per household in 2007. Now it's $51,000. So the average household has lost $6,000 a year of income over the past 6 years. Well, 8 years. I'm sorry, 8 years. Wages are stagnant at best and perhaps diminishing. More people are working part-time than ever before. And there's a sense of discouragement in the country. What about the national debt? The national debt today is around $18 trillion. We all know that. That's about what our GDP is, gross domestic product. That national debt, as it continues to grow, will become very difficult to service unless our economy grows. What happens is that the interest on the debt compounds and eventually reach the point where the interest payments on the debt alone are more than anything else in your budget. And then you run into trouble. But it's worse than that. But let me step back for a second. So why do we have some of these problems? Is there something we can point to that maybe will help us out here? I'd like to propose to you that there is. And it's called the percentage of government to gross domestic product. All right, in 1913, the percentage of government to gross domestic product was 13%. 13% of government, of gross domestic product was government. That includes government at all levels, state, local, and federal, okay? 13%. By 1996, well, actually, let's talk about 1960. By 1960, we were up to about 23% of gross domestic product, and we were still doing pretty well. Remember, at that time, one person, usually the man, would go out and earn a good income for enough to support his family in a middle-class style. We didn't have to have two incomes all the time. Those days are long gone, aren't they? That's because of what happened in the 70s, beyond which I'm not going to talk about that right now, but something did happen in the 70s that created that whole situation, and that continues till today. In 1996, the percentage of government to gross domestic product had increased to 32.4%. In other words, government made up 1/3 of the economy by 1996. All through the first part of the 2000s, even before the recession hit in 2008, 2009, okay? People complained because they just seemed not to be making as much money. There weren't good jobs around. There were jobs overseas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So we were having trouble in 1996. Now in 2009, the percentage of government to gross domestic product became 42%. That figure is a little bit misleading because that was at the worst part of the recession. So the private sector had contracted. And if you can recall, maybe you can't, but government was hiring people to try to get the economy going. So the government was expanding and hiring people, and that created this problem. Now, since 2009, there has been expansion, but a slow expansion, about 2% growth per year, more or less. And that's slow coming out of a recession, very slow. And that's also why our wages are stagnant. But what does this mean? This 42% of GDP is government. Well, there are really three main sectors of the economy, okay? There's the market. There is charity, which actually is a part of the market, but a specific one. And then there's government. Guess which one is the least efficient? Which can be demonstrated over and over again. It's the government. And why is that? Because they're not in competition. If the government wants more money, they try to tax you. And they will. They will tax you. They've shown they will tax you. So they get their money from taxation. They don't get their money from the free will of a consumer. Charities do, and the market does. So the market actually is the most efficient sector, the goods and services that are produced in the private market. So 42% of our economy in 2009, and probably somewhere in the upper 30s right now, well above a third of our economy, is in the least efficient sector of the economy. And you wonder why we have slow economic growth? I mean, you can throw money at that all day long, and you're just not going to get anywhere. So how do we get out of this? And how do we get out of, well, let's talk about a few other things. How do we get out of the national debt situation? All these things that threatened to kill this country. You know, it's kind of like being. Have any of you ever been to Niagara Falls? Okay, so if you go on the Canadian side, and there's a road there that goes up along Lake Erie, and as you're driving along, it's pretty placid and it's very pretty. There's trees, you know, beautiful lake and so forth. As you come closer to the falls, you start to see a current pick up. And initially, it's barely perceptible, and then a little more and a little more. And then it starts to get really very strong, and it gets very turbulent. And then it begins rushing. And when it goes, and then it comes to the falls, and it rushes right over those falls. Well, it's like the American economy and the American people are in a boat, and we're just sailing along down Lake Erie, okay? And we are now in a current. This current is headed for the falls. And it is going to happen unless we turn that boat around. My concern is that by the time we do something about this, that current will be so strong and so turbulent, we will be not able to avoid the crash. What does that mean for you and for me? Well, as Americans, it's a horrible thing. But there is hope, because when I went into medical school, I went in to become a doctor, and that was to treat patients. The idea was to be altruistic and also get paid for it, you know, which is a pretty good deal, right? Help people out, get paid. Nothing wrong with that. I didn't have a clue that someday you and I, physicians and surgeons, would hold the key to halting this this tremendous current that is going to take us over the falls. We are the ones. The Supreme Court won't do it. The President won't do it. The Congress won't do it. Even the people won't do it. It's up to us. It has to start here with you and me. So we're not just now treating patients. We're talking about this country. We're talking about the future of this country. We're talking about the future for our children and grandchildren. And it rests with healthcare reform. Why do I say that? In the 1950s, healthcare reform made up 4.5% of gross domestic product. Today, in 2015, it makes up really around 20 to 21% of gross domestic product. Now that's something, that's a tremendous amount of difference there. And we've discussed before that we should be getting better healthcare at lower cost rather than this ultra high cost that we have. And the reason we have the ultra high cost is because we have a very complex system. We have a complex system because of government intervention, okay? So how do we get to the direct pay, the efficient, the Occam's razor type of market? If we do that, let's say that the population is a little bit older now, okay? I really think it should be still at 4.5% if it were direct pay. But I'm going to concede people are a little older now. We got the baby boomers coming in, maybe up some. Okay, so let's make it well, let's see, let's make it, I don't know, 7%, something like that, 7.5%. How's that? 7.5%, right? I don't know if my math is correct here, but that means that about 12.5% of gross domestic product, the entire gross domestic product of the United States, is pure waste. 1/8 is pure waste just in healthcare. If we can get rid of that, what a boost in the economy. Why? Well, there are 3 ways to stimulate the economy. The first is to make money, which is what the Obama administration did with the stimulus plans. They basically, and the Fed did with what's called quantitative easing. They've made lots of money. When they do that, they purchase federal notes of debt. And so they and the world purchase this debt, and that increases our national debt. So when they make money, they increase national debt. Unless the economy were to grow so fast that it wouldn't matter. What happened was it didn't grow that fast. So now we have a huge problem with more debt and a stagnant economy. Not a good thing. So the first thing is to make money. I'm going to call it MM, make money, okay? The second thing you can do is cut taxes. Cut taxes. CT. If you cut taxes, what does that do? Well, it puts more money in the hands of the consumer, sort of like it puts it instead of making new debt, what it does is it puts money in the hands of the consumer in the private market, and that sounds good. But here's the problem: revenues to the government for a while, at least for quite a while, go down. Now you have your fixed costs. You have about 2/3 of the federal budget that's non-discretionary. You have to do this every year. They have to spend this amount every year. And it has to go up every year by law. So you have these fixed costs, and now you have less money coming in. So what happens? You increase the national debt. So both of these increase the national debt. The third thing you can do is increase economic efficiency. When you do that, you don't increase the debt. All you do is stimulate productivity. Look at this market in the 1950s. 4.5% of GDP, or GNP at the time it was called, is healthcare. What about the rest of the economy? We were booming. We had a 1.2% unemployment rate. Go. We were making everything. The whole world. We were the world's creditor nation. We are now the world's debtor nation. What happens is you get a diversified, healthy, productive economy. How does this help business expansion? Well, for one thing, when you cut the amount that businesses have to spend on health insurance, by the way, health insurance in many businesses now is the second biggest expense. It used to be Social Security was the second biggest expense next to wages. Now it's insurance, and specifically health insurance for many businesses. When you get rid of that, we become more competitive on a worldwide scale. All the rest of the world is competing with us as Americans. American businesses have this monkey on its back, so to speak, which is the responsibility of providing health insurance. When you take something like the Freedom Plan and you get rid of that, you actually make the production of goods and services cheaper, make the overhead less. So with competition, we can be making things cheaper, and that helps us on the world stage. It helps us to become more attractive for businesses around the world to invest here, and it makes makes us more competitive as far as coming up with great products that we can sell not just here, which is the biggest market in the world, but also around the world. So we're helping businesses. How do we help? How about individuals? When individuals are in a stimulated economy, are in demand, their wages go up. Okay, there's a book here, a little light reading for you, summer's evening. It's called The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. Now, doesn't that look like a lot of fun? Okay, this is what Thomas Jefferson used to read for fun. And I'm sure you would enjoy it too. I tell you, I got through this book, but there's only one way I got through it. I used to exercise on a stationary bike, and I put that book up there. If I didn't do that, I mean, this book is a snorefest. It is tough. But let me tell you one of the things I thought that was really, really interesting in this book that I learned. Again, Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, 1776. This was the inspiration for most of the founders as far as how they viewed the economy. What Adam Smith did is he compared the wages of three countries, three areas. Number one, France. Number two, England or Britain. And number three was the American Colonies. Now, he assumed that Britain would have the best wages of anybody because Britain was capitalistic. France was what we call mercantile. So to the French, being rich meant getting gold and silver, conquering countries, taking their gold and silver, and then becoming rich. They were mercantile. And I'm oversimplifying, but that's basically the kind of thing. In England, it was more the productivity, the industry of the people, production of goods and services, and trade. England was, of course, is an island, so trade is very important for England. And the American colonies, of course, a bunch of bumpkins. Everybody knew they'd come in last, right? Well, what he found was that he was right about France. France's wages were not as high as England's, but the number one, the highest wages were in the American colonies. A bunch of guys with coonskin caps and guns. Are you kidding me? Obviously, they were all wearing coonskin. There were businessmen, there were cities, there was so forth. There was trade going on, there's things going on. But the American colonies were number one. Why? This is what he found out. It was the rate of growth of the economy. It's not the size of the economy. It's not the sophistication of the economy. It's the rate of growth of the economy. We've been running a 2% rate of growth in a recovery. That's too slow to raise the demand for labor. What you want is a chronic labor shortage. When you have a chronic labor shortage, wages go up. It's supply and demand. A recession is when you have a labor excess, if you want to think of it that way. Okay, not enough jobs. The other way I look at it is labor excess. In an expanding economy, you want a chronic labor shortage. And when you do that, wages go up. How fast should the economy go to get wages up? It's a little bit of a dicey situation with the kind of monetary system that we have. But generally speaking, we should get about 5, 6, 7% annual rate of growth, and wages will begin to come up. Now, we're going to get rid of all this inefficiency. All right? We're going to have ourselves a direct pay marketplace in healthcare. And we're going to try to get, by doing that, and all those things that I brought up with you before, and all things that are written in the Freedom Plan, by getting this done, we help immediately the economic situation, and in the long term, we help as well. Why? Because now we have people owning their own healthcare insurance. People are responsible for paying their bills. They have the money. They think about things. Everybody, just about everyone, is going to have a retirement account. People are going to come out of the underground economy. And what you're going to have is relief for entitlements. We have 3 entitlements. They're all major ones that are going to go belly up sometime in the 2030s. Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. They can be fiddled with. We can kick the can down the road, but eventually they're going to go bankrupt unless we change things. But think about this. If you have 20-year-olds and 18-year-olds putting money away in a retirement account on the basis of a tax credit each year, they come out from the underground economy, and you get rid of the Obamacare thing where people have to buy insurance or they get fined. I mean, you got to get rid of that. That's a disincentive. Okay. But at any rate, if you do that, you end up with these young people getting, over the years, accumulating tremendous amounts of wealth because they're healthy most of the years of their lives. And again, there's a financial incentive to stay healthy. And if you start young, most people can live most of their lives with very low healthcare costs. All right, the chronic, recurring sickness problems do not exist. Not only that, but with the Freedom Plan or with similar plans where it's a direct pay system, a direct pay marketplace, physicians and surgeons can own a number of facilities, compete with one another for patients, compete with our current hospital situations, and so forth for patients, and you end up with a division of labor and increased efficiencies just from that alone. So what you're looking at here is simply by reforming healthcare in the right way, we can take our boat that is running along this current, and we can turn this boat to the side, we can turn this boat around, and we can come back to placid waters, and we can just bask in the sun. No more worries about going over the cliff. Believe it or not, I am not overstating things. This is the biggest single sector of the economy on the private side, okay, other than government. It's scheduled to be 30% of GDP in the year 2040. No society can stand that. All healthcare is patching us up so that we can get back to baseline. If 30% of your economy is patching you up so you can just get back to baseline, you're not producing anything. And you're adding to that inefficiency, I'm sorry. So we need to get these ideas in mind and understand that what we're doing here and what we're doing in the future for ourselves, for our families, for our patients, for our profession, these things are immensely important for society. And we can do this. How do we do this? Okay, number one, we have to have that end game in sight. Last time I gave you some points. This is the kind of thing we have to have. We have to stand for something. We have to convince doctors, surgeons throughout this country of the validity of this approach. And I can tell you right now, you talk to your patients, you talk to other doctors, there is a ton of discontent. This is a fertile field. The laborers may be few now, but if we keep at it, the laborers will be more and more. Okay? We can do this. This can be done. It's going to take a little bit of getting down on your knees and praying, perhaps. I don't know, because there's some big giants there that are in our way. But we can do this. And why can we do this? Because we control healthcare in America. It is not the insurance companies. It is not the government. It is physicians and surgeons. Perry, are you crazy? Well, maybe I am a little bit crazy, but who orders medication? Who prescribes? Who orders testing of all different kinds, all kinds of types? Oh, big things like electroencephalograms and EMGs and cardiac stress tests, stellium studies, on and on and on and on. Who schedules elective surgery? Who actually is responsible for the distribution of healthcare in America? Well, listen, people, you hold the key. And there are tactics, there are things that can be done to change what's going on. First step, get the backing of our profession. Second step, make it known to the authorities that we know that we are in control. Third step, be prepared to act. Now, I'm not going to give you specific tactics in this thing. This is recorded. Sorry, you're going to have to get that elsewhere. I'm not going to put that out there for the whole world to see. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The number one thing we want to do at this point is get that end game in sight, and then go with it, and then get our colleagues on board. That's the first step. Once we have a threshold of support, that's when we go the next step. And that's pretty much the end of my talk. So thank you very much for listening. Appreciate it. Adios.
Dr. Perry, thank you so much for your talk today, and thank you for joining us.
Well, it's an honor to be part of this. Thank you for having me.
Our colleague, Dr. Thompson, has read your book, and I think she's in the best position to start off the questioning, so I'm going to pass over to her.
Okay.
Good morning, Dr. Perry. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to begin with a question from our chat stream, Dr. Claire Coco, who's a primary care physician in New Braunfels, Texas. And she is asking for your thoughts with regard to physicians who participate in Medicare, or I'm going to say federally funded health programs, receiving health and retirement benefits from the federal government. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure I understand the question, actually. I'm sorry. What's that have to do with you're accepting Medicare, and then should you not accept retirement benefits? I'm not sure what that means.
Well, perhaps in return for participating with a federal program, a physician might receive federal benefits and be incentivized by doing so.
Well, that's up to an individual, sure. I mean, but is he talking about possibly legislation that would establish such a program? I have no problems with somebody getting paid for what they do, and if you want to get involved with a federal program, and the government wants to pay you for that any way they want to, either now or deferred, that's a free market kind of approach. That's fine with me.
So we have another question from the audience, Dr. Dorio, who asks if you are aware of other models around the world with a direct pay medical marketplace, and if so, can you comment on how it's working?
I can comment on how it worked in our country before we messed it up. As far as around the world, no. I was recently in. I can tell you how it works in New Zealand if you want to go there. That's not direct pay unless some doctors just opt out of the insurance and they just treat wealthier people. That's that one. And the countries that have the single payers, that generally is the way it works. They either get insurance, or if they're really rich like Rush Limbaugh, who has no insurance, just pays for it. But I don't know of an established system, direct pay system around the world that has been established by legislation. And that's the point. The point is that the legislation got us into this mess. And I think we're not bold enough by not holding them to it and stating this clearly, that they got this mess started. They are perpetuating the mess. The problems we have are clearly because of legislation, and they need to get us out of it. And that should be our position. That's my position personally. If you're going to have an organization that stands for doctor-patient relationships, the best possible doctor-patient relationships, and the most efficient economic model possible, you're going to have legislation change some things. And that was the idea behind the Freedom Plan, is to, how can we do this? Well, first off, you scientifically analyze what exactly happened, what the legislation was, why it did what it did, and then you direct the plan to specifically neutralize those distortions to the healthcare economy that we live with today. The direct pay marketplace is the key, but it's going to have to be established by legislation, I think, to really turn back what's been going on in our country for most people. I mean, there are obviously, as you know, there are primary care and even surgical, in Oklahoma and places like that, surgical places that are direct pay models. But they can only be sporadic. They can't be really giving America the kind of relief that it needs. The average American citizen, and including who are poor, we have to start thinking in terms of we're all in this together. Everybody needs to participate. And we have to have a program that is attractive to people from all economic strata.
Can I stop you right there, please? So I spent time with your book, and I'd like for you to summarize for the listeners what your Freedom Plan is. I thought it was very interesting. It was a nice presentation that you just gave us, but tell us from start to finish how the Freedom Plan works and promotes individual responsibility.
All right. The idea behind the Freedom Plan is the thing that distorted the healthcare economy was broadness of insurance coverage. It started out just being hospital insurance, which made sense. You have a catastrophe, you're really sick, you need to go to the hospital, it could ruin you, so you get hospital insurance. Made sense, okay? But then by the time Medicare came in, Part A, Part B came in right after that, and Part B broadened healthcare and broadened the coverage, insurance coverage of healthcare, and we've gone down that path more and more ever since, all the way up to Obamacare, which broadens it even more. And that just was shown in the 1970s by the Rand Corporation that is the most expensive way to deliver healthcare. So we have two things here. We have the satisfaction of the direct pay marketplace, and we have the economics of it. Okay? As far as the satisfaction, nothing could be better than to have a patient come in with a problem, they pay you, you make them better, everything's fine. That is set up on the basis of the Freedom Plan, allowing individuals to opt to have a $2,000 tax credit each year. That is, if they have a tax bill of $5,000 for the year, and I'm talking about including Social Security, okay, they could take up to $2,000 of that voluntarily if they want, okay, and they could place that, if they want, into their retirement account available to them, and then in response, they commit not to have a health insurance policy with a deductible less than that amount. So each year that you're healthy, you take that extra $2,000, and this accumulates in your retirement account. And what this does is this gets a lot of people who are not making a lot of money, and some of whom are trying to avoid all taxes because they want to avoid Obamacare, want to avoid the fines and everything else. It gets them involved. So now instead of a 20% penetrance, which is what we have now with HSAs, we have an 80 or 90% penetrance in the marketplace. And now you have a lot of people who have money available to them if they get sick for use. They don't have to take it out of their retirement account. They don't want. They can leave it in there and let it accumulate, but they got to pay their bills. And if they don't, then that money's taxable. And if they want to take it out, they can. If they want to take it out as a loan and pay themselves back, they can do that. That's one thing. The second thing is to decouple healthcare from businesses. I'm not saying that businesses need to drop healthcare. I'm just saying when the government tells you that every business that has 50 or more people in it must provide health insurance, that's just wrong. That distorts the market, and that puts a layer of bureaucracy between patients, their doctor, and their preferred hospital or anything else. And it just makes it into a kind of an entitlement. Hey, you know, I work here. This is my entitlement. I work here, and I get health insurance for it. We need to decouple that, and we can do that in conjunction with the tax credit. That is, when you take that tax credit, the tax deductible aspect of the health insurance on the part of the business is phased out over 3 years. That's the federal plan. Now, there's also a whole lot at the state level. The idea of licensing, the idea of insurance reform. Like right now, if you're going to pay a deductible, let's say you have $5,000 deductible and you go to a doctor, and like I did a couple years ago for my daughter, we went there, spent 5 minutes with the guy. He told me what I told him. I told him she needed some tonsillectomy. He says, yeah, she needs tonsillectomy. Okay, good. So then I get a bill for $160. And I'm thinking, there's no way that was worth $160. So I submit to my insurance. They said, well, it's $100. That's what we allow. So now I've got to pay this guy $100. Now, I'm not belittling what the guy did. I mean, he showed up, but literally 5 minutes, didn't do anything at all. And I thought that to myself. I said, you know what? In a free market, a real direct pay model, a direct pay. I shouldn't use that term. Direct pay marketplace. You should be able to negotiate your price. You can't do that, even with the high deductibles now. So that has to be addressed also, either at the we can do it at the federal level, but it's really the state's province to regulate insurance. And there are other aspects of it as well. It's really, the book is fairly comprehensive. I don't want to get into everything, but those are some highlights as to how we can end up with a vibrant direct pay system that is for real. I mean, where physicians and surgeons, there's no reason to have the soup to nuts hospital where you go in, you might go in, somebody may go in there to get a toenail or put podiatric surgery, or they might go in to get brain surgery, and everything in between. That doesn't make any sense. We're already trending towards the surgery centers, but there are some obstacles now in Obamacare to doing that, and certainly to having doctor-owned hospitals. There's some obstructions there. That's got to be eliminated completely. So what we need is we have these things elucidated and firm in our mind as to where you want to go. This is what I believe. Where you want to go, and every time, and make it simple. Maybe 5 things that you want to get. Okay, and every time you're addressing legislation, you're working toward those goals. That's the critical thing, and you know where you want to be with at the end result. And it's not going to happen overnight. That's the problem with Americans. We think things have to happen quickly. They don't. It took a long time to get into this mess. It's not going to happen overnight. We've got a lot. If you're all interested there in getting started, I assume that you are because you're tuning in and you're attending there. You've got to realize that this is going to take some work and it's not going to be easy.
Dr. Perry? Thank you. I have a question from one of our viewers, Dr. Jan Newman. She says, doctors have been so busy competing with each other that they have allowed insurance and hospitals to control health care. How do you propose to change this?
The reason that hospitals and insurance companies control health care is that there has been legislation that has promoted this system. It isn't. I would say that it's not that doctors are so busy competing with one another that we allow this to happen. We allowed it to happen, yes, because doctors don't seem to be generally speaking, very politically active. They've had it easy. They have made enough money. They have mortgages, they have, overhead, they have all kinds of things, and it's kind of frightening to take a stand where you might, risk something. But those days are fast coming to an end, as most of you know. And I think we have to sort of get out of our self-centered approach to things. What's in it for me? That's the problem. If, somebody a long time ago said, "Give and it shall be given to you, pressed down and overflowing." Okay. If what we do is good for the general public, for the general economy, for the patients, for the doctors generally, for our profession, we individually will also prosper.
Well, thank you. That leads me to another question. In your talk, you mentioned how difficult it is to get physicians to stand up and do something, and you just alluded to that as well. How do you think we go about getting our colleagues to stand up?
First thing you have to do is you need to have that set of principles that are market tested and appealing to physicians. I don't know. I forget what I had in the talk, frankly, because I couldn't hear it here. And I have 2 talks. So I don't know what I'm covering at this point. The idea is to have to get doctors involved requires concrete program of where you want to go, and a recognition that doctors are dissatisfied and patients are dissatisfied. You ask your patients if they like the way things are going in healthcare. Nobody likes this. And no, people didn't even, it's like Obamacare, they just passed the bill right over everybody. There's a tremendously large groundswell of discontent. And this is what I believe the single payer advocates like, because now they're going to come back and say, well, it's very expensive, we tried everything else, now we're going to try single payer. And what we need to do is we need to be ready with the alternative. But I think we have to start working now. I think we have to start using techniques used by successful organizations, everybody from the National Rifle Association to the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, whoever, using social media, direct mailing, whatever. And you start where you live and you work from there. One-on-one is the best. And then you've got to get the doctors behind it. The doctors hold the key to healthcare. And once you have got the doctors locally about it, and you then start getting relationships with legislators.
Dr. Perry, Dan Cravioto here. I have a question for you. You touched on it a little bit. I think the original intent of health insurance and even Social Security, as you alluded to, was that to prevent, in the event of some catastrophic, either economic or health event, that there was some safety net. And as a country, we've always tried to do that. How do you balance providing a safety net in the event of a catastrophic health or economic event versus that balance versus allowing individuals within a society to pay for, to the extent they can, goods and services on their own? How do you strike that balance?
Safety net should be something that's used rarely. Why is it not so? It's not so because healthcare costs are too high. Number one thing is you've got to have a system that gets healthcare costs down, okay? And that includes allowing doctors and to do some of the things that are now being done by hospitals, things like that. And then I think once those healthcare costs are down, then you start talking about Medicaid and other safety net things. And those can then be, I believe, if you change the way Medicaid is funded, I think you can probably end up with a kind of a competitive marketplace in charities for dealing with these things. Now, let me just tell you a quick story about my grandfather. I don't know how much time I have, but he was an Italian immigrant, okay?
2 minutes.
Came over when he was 7 years old. One of the first things he did, besides learning English, was he he shined shoes down downtown Philadelphia. And one day he was shining the shoes of this, my grandfather called him this well-dressed gentleman. Okay, this was a regular to his shoe shine place. Okay, and so as he's shining the shoes, the gentleman looks down at him and says, "What's that on your pants?" My grandfather said, "Well, that's osteomyelitis. I have a bone infection." And the man said, "Well, what's wrong with getting it fixed? I mean, have you had somebody try to look at it? Have you had surgery on it or anything like that?" My grandfather says, No. I mean, everybody has tried. I did have surgery before, but nothing ever worked. And now this is what I live with." So the guy gave him his card, said, "You have your parents get in touch with my office." Turns out the guy was the chief of surgery at Jefferson. Okay? They took my grandfather in. They did the surgery on him. He never drained again. They charged him absolutely nothing. We have lost something when that kind of thing doesn't happen. And that was a very common type of thing. When before Medicare, for instance, 10% of what doctors did, they accepted was going to be for free. This was part of being a doctor. And again, we start thinking in terms of we got to get paid for everything, we got to get insurance or not, whatever. But I think it starts there and it continues. Suppose now I have a surgery center. I have an anesthesiologist that works with me, and I have nurses that work with me. If somebody comes in that's poor and needs something done, okay, and I decide, well, pay me what you can, whatever. I have the ability to do that. Now, as far as the catastrophic illness, yes, that's where you would have your insurance, be it Medicaid, Medicare, or private insurance. That would be for the catastrophic problem, and that would be your safety.
Jack,
Yeah.
we're out of time now. We greatly appreciate your time. Thank you so much
Yes.
for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much.